Hey guys, welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today I'm going to be ranking all 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL based off of what we've seen in 2024. This isn't necessarily based on stats. I think that's kind of a boring way to rank players, like, oh, this guy had more touchdowns, this guy had more yards. No, I think that's a boring way to look at it. I'm simply talking here about my confidence level in these guys as a talent on the field. The guy I have at number one would be the guy I want the most if I'm trying to win the Super Bowl this year. The guy at 32 would obviously be the starter I'd want the least. And another thing real quick, obviously, some teams had different starters throughout the year. Like an example is the Browns. They had Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston play starting quarterback. So did I rank every player that started a game as quarterback this year? No. I went with the quarterback on each team that started the most games. So that's how I decided to do that. So I went with Jameis in that instance. Another example would be the Colts. They started Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, but Anthony Richardson had more starts, so I ranked Richardson instead of Flacco. So we're going to get into the list right now. I'm sure this is going to be a pretty long one. Like I said, not necessarily based on stats, just my overall confidence level in these guys as a talent based on what we've seen this year. So coming in at 32, I have Gardner Minshew. Not really a surprise that he's the worst starter in the NFL because he's simply not a starter. This guy's a career backup player. So it makes sense. You roll out there with a backup as your starter, it makes sense that he's going to be bottom on a list of starting quarterbacks because that's not what he is. He's been a career backup. I think Gardner Minshew is a really capable backup. If you need him in like a 3 or 4 game stretch when your starter is injured, he's really effective at that. He has value in doing that. But being your 17 game starter over a season, I think is laughable. And people always point to his season with the Colts. Well, yeah, he was playing in Shane Steichen's system. Shane Steichen, one of the most underrated offensive minds in the NFL. You know, Shane Steichen was with the Chargers, with Herbert early on, helping him develop. He went to the Eagles, and Jalen Hurts had his best season as a pro, was a runner-up for the MVP in Steichen's system. And then he made Gardner Minshew look like actually a starting-level QB and came within one pass of making the playoffs. So the Raiders bringing him in thinking he was going to be the starter. I told you guys from the start the Raiders were going to be a joke this year, especially with Antonio Pierce, who I never bought as a head coach. So, yeah, I don't think it's really any big surprise. They're going to be picking probably number 1 overall, and for good reason, because they're just a dumpster fire right now. And a lot of that stems from, let's bring in Gardner Minshew as our starter for the year. At 31, I have Derek Carr. I don't think Derek Carr brings anything. I don't think you can point to any one attribute of a quarterback and say, hey, Derek Carr brings us value in that department. Like, he's not a good athlete. He doesn't have a good arm. He's not accurate. He's not a good leader. He's bad in the clutch. He's bad in big games. What exactly does Derek Carr bring to the table in 2024, 2025? I think absolutely nothing as a starting level quarterback. I think he'd be a fine backup. I think he's kind of, at this point in time, he's now kind of in that camp of an Andy Dalton, where it's like, yeah, if you need him for a couple games, throw him out there. But anytime you roll out there with Derek Carr as your starter at this point in time, it's a fucking joke. And I still find it hilarious that after the Saints were 2-0, after beating a putrid Panthers team and a terrible Cowboys defense, everyone freaked out and thought the Saints were going to the Super Bowl. I'm not making that up. I watched First Take right after they beat the Cowboys. I don't know why, because First Take is a fucking clown show, but I watched it at work after that game against the Cowboys. They were having a real debate on First Take of, are the Saints going to go to the Super Bowl? And I think they went on to lose like 7 straight games after that. They fired Dennis Allen. It's like, guys, it's Derek Carr and Dennis Allen. So I never really understood why people were flipping out about the Saints. I never got it. I never trusted Derek Carr. And, you know, I think that's been reflected as the season has gone on because they're just a dumpster fire. At 30, I have Daniel Jones. So he's not even with the team that he started the season with. He got cut by the Giants a couple weeks ago, but I still would take Daniel Jones over Gardner Minshew and Derek Carr because at least there's something I can point to with Daniel Jones in terms of his value. I know that I can run the ball. You know, I know I have at least the concept of a dual threat ability with Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones has something that those two other guys don't have. He's won a playoff game. That's kind of crazy to say, but Daniel Jones has won a playoff game. In 2022, he beat the Minnesota Vikings in a playoff game. So Daniel Jones at least has that for his resume, and I at least know that there's something I can do with Daniel Jones where, he can at least run the ball a little bit. Gardner Minshew and Derek Carr have nothing of value. But yeah, sorry, Giants fans. The quarterback I'm ranking for your starting quarterbacks of 2024 isn't even on your team anymore, but he has the most starts for the Giants, so, technically he fit the criteria. But he's not very high, obviously. 29, I have Will Levis. Will Levis is just an extremely frustrating player because I think Will Levis has a lot of NFL-level tools. He has a great arm. He's a good athlete. But it's what's between the ears. Like we talk about with basketball players, basketball IQ. Well, when you look at Will Levis's football IQ, it's terrible. He's such a reckless player, makes so many dumb decisions that it really outweighs any of that talent you have. And I think the clock is really fastly ticking on Will Levis's career as a starter. I could see Will Levis actually having like a long career as a backup just because he has that howitzer of an arm. But I think he's so far outweighed by his boneheaded decisions. Reminds me a lot of Carson Wentz. Reminds me a lot of Jameis Winston, where there's a lot of talent there, but they're just too reckless to really have as your long-term starter. So Will Levis, definitely a big disappointment. I thought he'd actually be pretty decent this year, and he has been okay lately, but I just don't see him as a starter much longer in the NFL. At 28, just above Will Levis, I have Anthony Richardson. So if you watched my video a couple weeks ago, I did the bottom five starters in the NFL statistically, and I believe Anthony Richardson was number 2 on that list. I think he's such a hit or miss player. It's so frustrating again, kind of similar to Will Levis, because Anthony Richardson, I think, has all the God-given talent in the world. He's an A-plus athlete. He has a fucking rocket of an arm, can throw those 60-yard deep ball passes with ease. He struggles with the easy stuff. And majority of the passes in the NFL are not going to be your 60-yard bombs. They're going to be those little 6, 7, 8-yard throws, little easy completions. He can't do that. He's simply just way too inaccurate. It seems like he's throwing like a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, and he can't switch to dude, you're throwing it 6 yards. Calm down. It really makes no sense to me how you're an NFL quarterback, you have so much talent, yet you struggle with the easiest thing. The most important thing for a quarterback is accuracy. And Anthony Richardson is just an F in that category. Like we said, he's an A-plus athlete, but his accuracy is an F. So that just heavily outweighs it. I do think the Colts are going to give Anthony Richardson one more year. They did invest the 4th overall pick in him. They do have really high hopes for him, obviously. So I do think Anthony Richardson is going to get one more season as the Colts starter. But if I had to bet, I would say it's probably not going to work out. I mean, I don't think you can coach around his inaccuracy. I don't think that that's something that you can just fix. I think from a fundamental standpoint, that's just who he is as a player. And it really is a shame because we know he has so much raw talent and so much raw potential, but he just struggles at the easy stuff. So, I can't really put him much higher. 27, I have Jameis Winston. A lot of talent. He's a really productive player, but again, similar to what we talked about with Will Levis, he's just too reckless to be your long-term starter. I think he is a really good backup. I actually liked him that one year. If you guys remember back to 2021 with the Saints, I think that was the year after Drew Brees retired. Jameis Winston was given the reins of the Saints, and they were actually pretty good before Jameis got hurt. I want to say they were something like 4-1. They beat the Packers, which was a big deal because Aaron was coming off of the MVP that year. They beat that Packers team. So, we have seen glimpses of really high-end performances from Jameis Winston. Again, it's just outweighed by terrible decision-making, particularly in the big moments. We've seen time after time Jameis Winston crumble in the big moments and single-handedly cost his team big games. It's just a shame because we know this guy has so much freaking talent. He can sling the ball around. This guy was a Heisman, led his college team, Florida State, to the national title. I mean, he's got a lot going for him. He's just too reckless, I think, for my taste and to be really a long-term starter. Yeah, he's definitely an upgrade over to Deshaun Watson, but I think you or me would be an upgrade over Deshaun Watson. So it's not really saying a whole lot. But, you can't deny his productivity. He's going to throw those big bombs. He's going to, he's a fun guy. I think he's a good leader, but just outweighed by his recklessness too much. 26, I have Bryce Young. So if I would have made this list, I don't know, a month or two ago, Bryce Young probably would have been dead last on this list. Referring back to that video I made, it was the bottom 5 starters in the NFL. Bryce Young was dead last. I had him as the worst starter in the league. And that wasn't even me just saying that. That was from a statistical standpoint. Every stat we looked at, Bryce Young was the worst in the NFL. His completion percentage, his QBR, his yards per game, his touchdown to interception ratio, all fucking abysmal. But I don't know, something happened after he came back as the starter. Maybe the benching really helped him mentally. I don't know exactly what happened. But he looks like a capable player now, whereas I never thought I would say that about Bryce Young, because I already pounded the gavel on the guy's career. Because it wasn't just the stats, it was also just the eye test. Like, he's not a great athlete. He's really, really tiny, really small, doesn't have a great arm. He was struggling with his accuracy, not a great leader. There's just really didn't bring a whole lot to the table. But now, as he's come back from the benching, we're starting to see a little bit of glimpses why he was such a highly touted prospect. The accuracy has really taken a dramatic step up, and he's playing much more clean, efficient football. Almost beat the Chiefs and almost beat the Eagles. Was really close to beating those guys. So I give him credit. It's like I felt bad every time I talked bad about him because I always liked Bryce Young. He was really fun to watch at Alabama. But I don't know how you could have defended him at the time, but right now he looks pretty good. I think Bryce Young has earned himself another year as the Panthers starter, whereas if you would have told me that, I don't know, back in week 7, I would have said, no, he's done. But now he's played his way back, I think, into being a starter for at least another year in the NFL. Am I saying he's still going to work out? He's still got a lot to go, because he was at a point where it's I don't think you can go any lower. So, yeah, he has improved, but again, in terms of him having a 5-10-year career as a starter, I still think that the odds are very heavily against that just because of his size. But I am giving him credit for him playing much better after coming back from the benching. 25. This guy was one of the most difficult players for me to rank on this list because this guy actually started off the season very well, had a really, one of the best games of the season, and then this past 4 or 5 weeks has fallen off a fucking cliff. If you haven't guessed by now, it's Kirk Cousins. What a fall from grace for Kirk Cousins. It wasn't that long ago the Atlanta Falcons were sitting at a record of 6-3. They had a 3-game cushion over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Looked like they were just going to walk into the playoffs. Kirk Cousins was having a really good season to start off. The first game against my Steelers, he definitely struggled. But from there, he looked really good. It was hey, Kirk is back. He was spreading the ball around to all the weapons. He wasn't just forcing it to Drake London. He was also using other guys like Darnell Mooney. Obviously, Kyle Pitts Kyle Pitts is what he is, but he looked all right with Kirk. Bijan has even come around. So there was a lot of optimism, at least for me, about the Atlanta Falcons. I thought Kirk looked pretty good. And then something just happened. These past 5 games, Kirk Cousins threw 1 touchdown, and he threw 9 interceptions. So I don't know what the fuck happened with Kirk Cousins. It's kind of one of the craziest things I've ever seen because it's usually when an older player falls off, it happens in between seasons. So they'll go into the next year, and they just suck for that whole year. But Kirk Cousins kind of fell off in the middle of a season. I don't know if I've ever quite seen such a rapid fall off. A lot of people talk about his injury. I definitely think that played a part in this, but we've seen Kirk have good games since the injury. Look back to that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Thursday Night Football, the overtime win. He threw for over 500 yards. He was incredible in that game, playing incredible football. I don't know exactly what happened, but obviously now he has been benched for Michael Penix, something I've been banging the table for weeks now. 100% think that was the right move, and I honestly think it was a little overdue. I think Kirk Cousins kind of single-handedly costed the Atlanta Falcons a playoff berth this year. Because like I said, they were 6-3, had a 3-game lead over the Bucs, and he, in that 5-game stretch, threw 1 touchdown and 9 picks. That right there costed the Falcons the playoffs this year. So I don't know what the future holds for Kirk Cousins. Because if Michael Penix comes in and looks good, there's no fucking way they're going back to Kirk. But it also is weird to have a guy making that much as your backup, which is why I always criticized the move of bringing in both of them. I was still, to this day, stand on the fact that it was idiotic for the Falcons to bring in both of these guys. Either you bring in Kirk and try to win right now, or you don't bring in Kirk and go with Penix and try to build around him. That's not what they did. They tried to do this two timeline shit. And when Raheem Morris was asked, why did you go with two quarterbacks? He said, oh, we're going to be so good under my reign here in Atlanta that we're never going to be picking in the top 10 again. So we had to take Michael Penix. It's like such a cocky answer. It's like, I don't know. And Raheem Morris has a lot of crazy quotes. Yeah, there was another quote he had where they asked him, why do you have so many coaches on your staff? And he was like, well, when you win a lot of games, people hire away your coordinator. So we're just going to have our coaches already ready to step up on the staff. It's like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you haven't done anything. Like, I don't know where this false sense of confidence came from. Like, I liked Raheem Morris a lot as a hire. I gave the Falcons a lot of credit because he was awesome with the Rams last year as their coordinator, but he has not handled this well. Right now, I think Raheem Morris is a little over his head right now, especially how he let Kirk Cousins basically play them out of a playoff spot. I think Penix should have been in there weeks ago. But I'm getting a little off topic, so let's move on now to 24. I have Drake May. Drake May has been actually pretty impressive since they've put him in. Like, I know it's not like he's lighting it up. I think he has a 12-9 touchdown interception ratio, but that's still miles better than what Jacoby Brissett was doing. And something I always point to with Drake May is the Patriots literally have the worst receiving core in the NFL. I don't even think it's particularly close. So whenever you actually give Drake May a weapon, hopefully they will address that in the draft. I don't know if they're going to get that McMillan guy from Arizona. Maybe they'll end up getting Travis Hunter, the Heisman. There's rumors of them bringing in T. Higgins, but no matter what they do this offseason, they have to get people for Drake May to throw the ball to, because it's very clear there is something there with Drake May. There is something there. I could definitely see Drake May being a long-term starter in this league, a Pro Bowl level guy. He has all the talent to do that. So yeah, I think the sky really is the limit for Drake May, and we're going to have to talk more about what the Patriots should do this offseason because it's really important not to fuck up Drake May, kind of like what the Bears have done with Caleb. But let's move on to 23. I have Trevor Lawrence. I don't know what to do with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, a guy that I have defended on this channel. I think that I still think a lot more highly of Trevor Lawrence than majority of people. His stock is at an all-time low right now, especially with that contract attached to him. I don't know what the fuck's going on in Jacksonville. Like, I really don't understand, because I have seen moments where Trevor Lawrence looked really good in the NFL, and you can call me whatever, but I always point back to his second year in the NFL where he was really, really good. I think he threw like 28 touchdowns to like 6 picks, got to the playoffs, and led one of the best comebacks I've ever seen in a playoff game against the Chargers. They were down like 24-0 at halftime. He was incredible in the second half of that game. And if you go back to the 2022 season, people seem to forget this about Trevor Lawrence is, like, I think after week 10 of 2022, Trevor Lawrence was statistically the best starting quarterback in the NFL and not named Patrick Mahomes. So it's like people were freaking out about him getting the contract, and they were like, what has he done? Well, it's like, look at what he did in 2022. Like, he's won a playoff game. Like, I kind of understood why they did it. I don't know. There's no easy fix here with Jacksonville. I think there's a lot of issues with this team. I think it's a very mediocre roster. I think they expected Trevor Lawrence to just be the savior of this franchise, and I still think he's a good player, but he's not a great player. And the Jaguars paid Trevor Lawrence to be a franchise savior level player, like a Josh Allen level type player, and he's simply not that. He's several rungs down the ladder of a Josh Allen. My thing, though, yeah, I'm putting him really low. My thing with Trevor Lawrence, though, is I'm still not 100% giving up on Trevor Lawrence. I don't know what it is. maybe it's just a case of me buying into the hype of him as a prospect, even at this late date, but I have seen him have success in this league. And you even go back to last year, 2023, the Jags were 8-3. They were the 1 seed in the AFC. Then Trevor Lawrence got hurt, and they obviously missed playoffs. Big disappointment. But I just feel like if they would get things right, if they just got competent management of this football team, not have so much fucking instability with the coaches, because if they fire Doug Peterson, it's another coach, another coordinator. I don't know. Like, the Jags are just such a mess. I don't know what the fix is, but Trevor Lawrence, I can't deny he's just a disappointment. He is one of the biggest disappointments in recent memory. So that's why he is so far down this list. And speaking of highly touted prospects that disappointed, at 22, I have Caleb Williams. I'm just putting him slightly over Trevor Lawrence right now because I still think he has that upside, but wow. Another thing where it's like I'm almost speechless with how this year has played out with the Bears. Like, I can't believe it. I cannot believe the Bears are on their way to fucking up another top-tier quarterback prospect. Like, Caleb Williams is legitimately one of the best college quarterbacks we've ever seen. Go back to his Heisman year. You look at all the hype, and it's not like he has bad players around him. Like, that was legitimately one of the best receiver cores going into this year. Like, I don't want anyone doing revisionist history. Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze, that you could argue that was the best trio of receivers going into this NFL season. So the guy had fucking talent around him. The problem was the coaches didn't know what they were doing. His offensive coordinator was so good at his job that they fired him after just 10 games. His head coach fired after Thanksgiving. Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know. I already put out a video. If you want to hear more about my specific thoughts about the Bears, click on the channel and scroll down a little bit in my videos. It's my final Bears rant, because it's basically everything I could say, all my problems with the Bears. But yeah, Caleb Williams, I just don't know. I mean, and there is some blame to go around for him as well. Like, yeah, I bash on Eberflus, I bash on Shane Waldron, I bash on the ownership of the Bears. But there definitely is some blame to go there for Caleb as well. He's just not played very well. His biggest problem, I think, is he holds onto the ball way too long, and he tries to make like these miracle plays. That's something that he did at USC a lot, and it worked for him. That's why he was such an electric player, but it doesn't really translate into the NFL like that. You know, he's really just running around for his life. The offensive line is fucking terrible. I think it's clear that if the Bears could have a redo on that pick where they took Rome Odunze, they would have just taken an offensive lineman instead. Because their line is a fucking train wreck right now. And you just watch the Bears. Caleb is running around for his life. He has no time no time to really watch the play unfold. And he's like seeing ghosts right now. Like, I watched that game against the Vikings on Monday Night Football. The guy's seeing ghosts. He's throwing to nobody. He's holding on to the ball way too long. He's running around. Just looks bad. So I don't know. I still will hold out hope for him. He's still so young, still has so much upside, but not a good start to his career whatsoever. Let's see where we are now. 21, I have Geno Smith. Geno Smith, I think this is the best version we've seen of Geno, but the guy still throws a lot of picks. That's the problem, but Geno Smith, I think, is a good player, not a great player. You know exactly what your ceiling is whenever you have Geno Smith as your quarterback. Your ceiling is about a 9-win team. You can make the playoffs, but that's about it. So he's definitely like a good player, but he's just kind of frustrating because like he throws so many picks. Like, I think he has almost as many picks as he has touchdowns this year. Last time I checked, I think he had 14 touchdowns and 12 picks. So it's like, yeah, he's a good game manager. He does good stuff, but he turns the ball over just way too much. I think that another problem with Seattle is, like, at least earlier in the year, I feel like their play caller, Ryan Grubb, just didn't really know what he was doing. Like, I feel like from a game-to-game basis, he would jump around from the philosophy of what the offense was trying to do. It's like, one day we're just going to pound the rock. One day we're going to ask Geno to just be the Superman of this team. And it's like, Geno Smith is not fucking Josh Allen. He can't just throw on a Superman cape and carry a team. But I feel like The Seahawks were trying to have Geno do that in a bunch of games this year, especially that early game against the Niners. They asked Geno to basically just carry them. And it's like, that's not who Geno Smith is as a player. So he's a good player for sure. Really good bridge guy. Definitely a starting level quarterback in the NFL. I just don't think that you have a very high ceiling with him as your guy. At 20, this is going to ruffle some feathers. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. At 20, I have Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. Like, you guys, a lot of people argued with me this offseason that I was being too critical of Rodgers and the Jets. Basically, everything I said about Aaron Rodgers in the offseason turned out to be true. Basically, every single thing I said. Turns out when you're that old, coming off of that injury, you're kind of shot. That's what Aaron was. And you guys know what made Aaron Rodgers so special in Green Bay was his ability to get out of the pocket, extend plays with his feet. Like, he was just such a playmaker in every sense of the word. Now that's gone. He can't move. The Jets line sucks. He has no time to throw the ball. He still has a really good arm. I give him credit for that. That's what propelled him to the 20 spot, because his arm is still really good. He can still throw the strikes. It's just everything else in his game has gone. You know, the dynamic ability of his game is just shot. So Aaron Rodgers, I don't really think it should be a big surprise that he's just this far down the list. He's just not he's just not really anything special. You know, I have him a slightly above Geno Smith. That's what I think Aaron is. Like, he's good, but just when we look at what he was just a couple years ago, he is so far removed from that. He's such a shell of himself in terms of his play style. Right above him at 19. So this is going to sound crazy, but just go watch the film. Right above him at 19, I have Bo Nix. If you would have told me in 2024 I'd take Bo Nix over Aaron Rodgers, I mean, wow. But how can you deny it? I mean, Bo Nix has really played well this year. I still am not the biggest fan of the Broncos. I'm not a big Sean Payton guy whatsoever. I think that guy is really full of himself. He thinks he's like God's gift to football. But you cannot deny what he's done with Bo Nix has been supremely impressive. I mean, Bo Nix, I still think it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. I do think in the big games, Bo Nix has performed pretty poorly, but we're going to see, because they're going to be a playoff team this year. So I'm really, really interested to see what Bo Nix does in a playoff environment. But he just does his job perfectly. It's like when we talk about game managers, people act like that's a negative connotation. I don't think that way at all. I think it's just a style of play, and that's the style of play Bo Nix does, and he does it at a really good NFL level. He's had a really good season. You just can't deny that. I'd be kind of a hater if I, didn't put him higher, like this high. Like, he's been good. I can't deny it. Even though I thought it was a really dumb draft pick, a lot of people shit on the Broncos for taking him that high. It's worked out. They're going to be a playoff team this year. At 18, I have Tua Tagovailoa. You know what you get from Tua. He's a good NFL quarterback. Like, people might hear 18 and think that's bad. No, I think that just kind of reflects how many good quarterbacks there are. Like, I've for the majority of my time on this channel have been a Tua supporter. I understood him getting that contract, because I was like, guys, they've made the playoffs with him. What do you want them to do? Just start over from scratch? That's not really how the NFL works. So everyone freaked out about the Tua contract. I didn't really, because that's just kind of how the NFL works. He's good. I think this is the total best version we were going to see of Tua. I give McDaniel a lot of credit for what he's done with Tua, because this is, I think, the absolute best version of Tua we were ever going to see in the NFL. They've built such an incredible offensive apparatus around him with those receivers. Achane's really come along. Just their whole scheme, running that Shanahan-style offense. He's good. My problem with Tua, though, is kind of similar to what we said about Geno Smith, is there are clear limitations to his game. They always struggle in big games. And that's why I have called the Dolphins the Cowboys of the AFC, because they always really crumble in any big or meaningful game. It's really frustrating, because I like a lot of the Dolphins players, but look at it. I mean, it's a proven track record. It's not me just saying that. Go look at every time they play a big game. I think the Bills have beaten them every time since Tua has been drafted. Maybe they beat them once. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that's a real thing. The Bills have never lost to the Dolphins in the Tua era. You go back to Tua's one playoff game. Now, I know it was against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, but holy shit. I mean, that was one of the worst NFL performances I've ever seen in my life. Like, he was literally, there were wide open guys on the sideline. Tua's throwing it, like, at their feet. He was so fucking rattled in that game, that playoff game against the Chiefs. So, that's my problem with Tua is, yeah, he's flashy against the bad teams. He can beat up on bad teams, which is good. You know, you want to beat the bad teams, but he just doesn't really do anything in the big games. So at 17, I have Jayden Daniels. I would take Jayden Daniels over Tua. I don't think that's a controversial thing. Even though Jayden has definitely slid down. When he got off, like the first 2 months of the season was red hot. If he would have continued to play like that, he would have been probably in the top 10, pretty comfortably in the top 10, but he definitely has gone down a little bit in terms of his play. And I think that really stems from the fact that the Washington Commanders asked Jayden Daniels to do a lot for their offense. And he's, it's not like he's the most jacked guy out there. Like, he is tiny. He has a small frame. He's getting hit around by 300-pound men for months now. That's going to wear on your body, especially as a rookie. So that would be my number one thing for Jayden this offseason is just fucking bulk up every day, get in the gym, get fucking shredded. Kind of like what Tua did. A couple off seasons in a row, we would see Tua put on some muscle. I think Jayden Daniels would really, really benefit from that. But we know when he's healthy, when he's 100% fully healthy, Jayden Daniels is one of the most electric players. Had a ton of signature wins earlier in the year. Think back to that win against the Bengals. I think that was a Monday Night Football game where I think he had a perfect game. I think he had 0 incompletions or no. Maybe he had like 80% completion. Like, his start to the year in terms of his efficiency is literally unprecedented. We've never seen a player, let alone a fucking rookie, be that accurate to start off the season. Of course, I think his crowning achievement would be the Hail Mary against the Chicago Bears, which, in its own right, really impressive, but it also fucking killed the Bears this season. I think they lost every game since then. But yeah, sky is still the limit for Jayden Daniels. I think that guy is going to be a superstar in the NFL, but I do have to put him down a little just because, he has fallen off a little bit just because the wear and tear of the NFL season, but they're probably going to be a playoff team, and that's a really impressive accomplishment for what Washington has been these past couple of years. 16, Dak Prescott. Very similar to Tua. I think he's the right-handed Tua Tagovailoa. Now, I think he is a better athlete than Tua. He's obviously bigger than Tua. He has more mobility than Tua. But in terms of their production, they can beat up on bad teams. Anytime they play real competition, they usually crumble, shit their pants, and are the singular reason why they lose big games. And if you're a longtime listener of this channel, you've already heard me rant and rave about Dak Prescott. We talked a lot about him last year, about how he was fool's gold. So you've heard all this stuff before, but that's really my thing with Dak Prescott is he is fool's gold. There's really, I think, no substance there with him. He's really good at beating up on bad teams. Anytime the Cowboys rely on Dak to beat good teams, it's a fucking train wreck. It's a disaster anytime Dak is really asked to do anything big. That's why his playoff record is so putrid. You look back to just last year, the playoff game against the Packers. The Packers were the youngest team in the playoffs last year as the 7th seed against the 2-seeded Cowboys in Jerry World. And why did they lose that game? Yeah, their defense was really bad, but Dak was a... Just go look at how Dak performed in that game. I think he had 0 yards in the first quarter, threw 2 pick sixes, padded his stats whenever they were down by 30 in the fourth quarter. That's what Dak is. That's exactly what Dak Prescott is. If you want to beat the Jets, if you want to beat the Giants, if you want to beat the Commanders, Dak Prescott is your guy. But if you want to win a meaningful football game, Dak Prescott is a joke. At 15, I have Brock Purdy. Why would I put Brock Purdy above Dak Prescott? I've seen him win big playoff games. That's something I have not, Brock Purdy's been to a Super Bowl, and I get it. He had a lot of talent around him, but so is Dak. Dak has had a lot of talent around him as well. Maybe not to the degree of Brock Purdy, but he's had some pretty fucking stacked teams as well. Brock Purdy at least got to the Super Bowl. That's something tangible I can point to with Brock Purdy. Now, he's definitely a polarizing player. We're definitely going to have to make some videos this offseason talking about what's going to happen with his contract and all that. I do think it's crazy that if he wants like $55 million, I'd let Brock Purdy walk, because we have seen teams make that mistake, like the Cowboys with Dak, like Daniel Jones, where these teams pay these guys and they're just not that good. Not saying that's going to happen with Brock Purdy, but you start to get in the range of some of these figures they're talking about for Brock Purdy is kind of crazy. And the criticism for Purdy last year was, hey, he's looking really good with all these weapons around him. What happens when you pay him and you can't afford to have Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Trent Williams, McCaffrey? We kind of saw a little bit of that this year where with the injuries. Brandon Ayuk wasn't really good, then he got hurt. Debo is clearly not the same player he was. McCaffrey, I think, played 2 or 3 games this year. So he's really only had Kittle. Kittle's been really good, but that's kind of the only one he's had of the Avengers. And he's just kind of looked all right. Like, he's not terrible, but you go back to 2023, he led a lot of statistical categories, especially like the efficiency, a lot of the analytical advanced stuff. Brock Purdy was like at the top of those lists. But you look at this year, when you take away some of those weapons, it's like, yeah, that's kind of what the NFL is. Like, majority of quarterbacks don't have the fucking Avengers on offense. So he's a very polarizing player because he's surrounded by so many great players. So it's hard to really gauge what Brock Purdy is. But I think a really accurate reflection of that would be, look what happened this year when you took some of his weapons away. He wasn't really anything that special. So that's why I would be hesitant to give him $55 million. Because when you cut a check that big to the quarterback, you can't afford all these great players. So we're going to see. There's a lot of stuff we got to talk about with the Niners. Their disappointing season, what they're going to do this offseason. They have a lot of big decisions to make this offseason. We're going to talk about all of it on the channel. But as of right now, I would take Brock Purdy as the 15th best quarterback. At 14, right above him, I have Kyler Murray. I still think Kyler Murray is one of the most individually gifted players in the NFL right now. And I've not tried to hide at all the fact that I'm a massive Kyler Murray fan. I really, really think highly of him. But just because I'm a fan of the guy doesn't mean I'm going to be blind to his shortcomings. And that is, he's so wildly inconsistent. So inconsistent. And when it comes to stuff like this, it's like, I think it really just comes back to their drive. Like, does Kyler Murray, is he 100% in on football? Like Lamar, you don't question when you think about Lamar. That guy is fucking fully in, 100%. Football is his life. Is football Kyler Murray's life? No, I don't think so. Like, there's a reason why they had to put into his contract, like, there was a quota he has to hit per week of how much film he has to watch. And there was obviously all the Call of Duty stuff. And, he was also considering a career in baseball instead of football. So it's like, I think that's Kyler Murray's biggest problem is he had, like, you cannot have more God-given potential, more God-given talent than Kyler Murray possesses. His problem is his drive, his motor. I think it's similar to like a Ben Simmons or an Anthony Davis, guys in the NBA with a ton of talent, but just, obviously Anthony Davis in a different stratosphere than Ben Simmons. But in terms of like their motor, you question, do they really like care that much? That's my question with Kyler is like, I don't think he's a grinder. And that is a big problem when you're a franchise level quarterback and you have that much talent. It's really frustrating. But that's being said, put his inconsistencies aside. Why do I have him so high? I still, like I said, I still think he's just so individually gifted. He does basically everything you want from a quarterback. He's a great athlete, A-plus level athlete, has a great arm. He has A-plus speed. He's basically impossible to catch in the open field. He's so elusive, can get out of the pocket, extend plays, throw the deep ball. Like, he does everything really well you'd want from a quarterback. It's just, you question his effort on a game-to-game basis, and I don't think you can quite get into the top 10 or be higher than 14 whenever that's the issue. So at 13, we have a player very similar to Kyler, at least in his prime, Russell Wilson. I have my Steelers quarterback, Russell Wilson, at 13. I think it's a very fair spot to put Russ with what he's done with the Steelers this year. I mean, has completely transformed our offense. When you look at the guys we were trotting out there with the past 2 years with Pickett, with Rudolph, with Trubisky, it's night and day. Like, we're not used to seeing this over the past couple years in Pittsburgh. Like, wow, a functional offense. Like, that's something we haven't seen in so long. Like, even Ben's last year was kind of rough. So you'd have to probably go back to, like, 2020 was the last time we at least had, like, a competent level offense. So it's been a while. And it's been really fun. This has been a really fun year with Russ. I believe he's 6-2 in his starts with the Steelers. And he's really unlocked the component we were missing, which is that deep ball ability. That's something we did not have before Russell Wilson was the starter. Even with Justin Fields, it was a lot of like dink and dunk, run around, throw to the sideline for 2 yards, hand the ball off to Najee 50 times in a row. Russ has really opened up the offense. This isn't really a criticism of Russ. It's more so just a critique of the roster is we need to get another playmaker on offense. Because if you've watched the Steelers, these 2 games without George Pickens, the offense is so limited without George Pickens because the other receivers are just not that good. I mean, I like them, but when there's no George Pickens out there, none of those guys can step up as number 1 guys. Like, I like Calvin Austin, great speedster. I like Mike Williams. I like Van Jefferson. But when Pickens is gone, the Steelers' offense is a joke. So that's something we definitely need to address in the offseason. But getting back to Russ, has completely unlocked this offense, with that deep ball throw ability to George Pickens. He had a lot of success with that in Seattle with DK Metcalf. George Pickens is almost a carbon copy of DK Metcalf. I mean, they even wear the same fucking number. So it's really not that shocking that they have such a good connection. Russell Wilson can just throw those 50-50 balls, and more times than not, George Pickens is going to come down with the football. So I give Russ a lot of credit. He's really rejuvenated his career. I want Russ back 100%. Whereas going into the year, I didn't know which one I wanted, Fields or Russ. I want Russ. Sign Russ up to a 3-4 year deal. I'd be 100% fine with that. He's looked really good this year. So moving on, we have at number 12, C.J. Stroud has definitely fallen down. So I think last year I ranked him as like 7. So he has fallen down here to 12 out of the top 10. I don't quite know. I mean, I can point to the offensive line. That really is the biggest problem for the Houston Texans is their offensive line is fucking bad. It's really bad. So I guess that's something you could point to with this regression. But I would also say it was the same line as last year. Like, they had the same exact offensive line last year. Maybe I'm mistaken. You can let me know in the comments. They lose some major player on their O-line. I don't remember that happening. So how is there this big of a drop-off? I don't know. I mean, it's one of the bigger sophomore slumps I've seen, especially based on the trajectory I thought Stroud was on. I thought he was, going to have like 35 touchdowns this year. I think I don't know. I think he's at half that. Is he at like 17 right now? So really, really disappointing just based on what he did his first year. He's still a really, really good quarterback, a really high-level quarterback, someone I would trust in big games. His signature win, obviously, last year in the playoffs against the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, Cleveland Browns, carved them apart. So they're going to get back to the playoffs. I'm really interested to see what C.J. Stroud does in that playoff game because it's really going to, for me, impact how I think about him as a player. Because he's had a bit of a rocky year, but if you start lighting it up in the playoffs, that I'm going to kind of forget about that regular season pretty quickly. Number 11, right above C.J. Stroud, I have Baker Mayfield. This is not a controversial statement. Baker Mayfield has been really, really good this year. Like, this is the Baker Mayfield the Browns thought they were getting when they drafted him. It turns out Baker just kind of needed to grow up, and I think that's, like, he got humbleized, if that's even a word, when he jumped around from team to team. Like, he went to Carolina, didn't work, went to the Rams, they didn't bring him back. He called the Bucs didn't call him. He won the starting job, and he's never looked back. He's the perfect fit in Tampa. Just a tough guy. Like literally their last game of the year last year, played with fucking cracked ribs to get them into the playoffs, won the playoff game against the Eagles, carved apart the Eagles secondary. And this year, despite all the injuries, these guys have had like a million fucking injuries, but Baker, with his leadership and his play, has led them to just stay afloat. And they're going to get back to the playoffs, and I wouldn't be that shocked if I picked them to win their first-round matchup, depending on who they play, because I really do believe in Baker. Like I said, this is the version we thought we were getting of Baker when he was drafted number 1 overall, So now we're entering the top 10. So number 10, I have Jordan Love. Jordan Love is a hard one for me because he is so wildly inconsistent, and I tend to shy away from inconsistency. And that's why I've kind of backed off Kyler. Like, I've had Kyler for a long time as a top 10 quarterback, but I think this year I came to the full-blown realization that he's just too inconsistent to be in the top 10. Jordan Love is, I think, at risk of that happening with him because you just don't know which version of Jordan Love you're getting on a game-to-game basis. You know, you could have a game where Jordan Love goes out there and looks really good, throws 4 touchdowns, but you're also, every once in a while, he's going to go off the tracks and throw 4 picks. But I think I would be willing to take that gamble. He has so much upside. He has such a great arm. And it's so fascinating because he is Brett Favre. That's exactly who Jordan Love is. And I don't know if he's to the level of Brett Favre because Brett Favre won a bunch of MVPs. I don't know if Jordan Love's going to do that. But in terms of his play style, his archetype, he is Brett Favre. He is the modern-day gunslinger. You're going to live or die by that guy. And more times than not, it does work out. So I'm putting him at 10. I'm a little hesitant because I don't know. I don't know. I got to see more. Like, that's another thing with Jordan Love is he still hasn't played a whole lot. So I am really excited for them in the playoffs as well. That's another big thing is I really want to see how Jordan Love performs in this playoff game because he was awesome against the Cowboys, struggled against the Niners through the game-losing interception to the Niners last year in the playoffs. So I'm really, really interested. Again, similar to like I said about CJ, really want to see what Jordan Love does. Number 9. This is the one that if you would have told me before the season started, I would have never talked to you again because I would have said you're a fucking clown. Don't talk to me. That's Sam Darnold. I give Sam Darnold all the credit in the world for what he's done. I think it's just a case of they threw him out there with the Jets and they were like, go be the savior. And very few players in the history of the league, it's under 1%, are equipped to do that. You know, we're talking about like a Peyton Manning level player, Andrew Luck when he came in, Patrick Mahomes, like Josh Allen, like these guys that can just take over a franchise and carry them. That's what the Jets had the expectations of Darnold, and that's just not the type of player he was. And he's another guy like Baker who's bounced around from team to team, but once they got him in the right spot with the Vikings, with an incredible coaching staff and one of the best offensive setups in the league with those receivers, with Aaron Jones, a good line when it's healthy. He's really, really impressed me because my thing with him going into this year was like, yeah, he's got a lot of stuff around him. I like Kevin O'Connell, but at the end of the day, it's Sam Darnold. Like, Sam Darnold has always held himself back with his reckless decision-making. Just, it kind of has that Carson Wentz element to him where he tries to play the hero ball and it comes back to bite them in the ass. We haven't really seen a whole lot of that, and I really attribute that to Kevin O'Connell, how he's used Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold, even for a good chunk of the year, was in an MVP conversation. I don't think, not now, but he has by far had the best year of his career, and I think he's very, very similar to Baker. They were drafted only 2 picks apart in 2018. Baker was number 1, Sam was number 3. So they have, basically identical career paths. They didn't work out in their first place. They bounced around a couple teams, finally found the right spot, and had the best season of their career. It's kind of crazy how much those two guys mirror each other's careers when they came in the same year. That's what we're seeing with Sam Darnold. Like, what Baker has become in Tampa, that's what Darnold is becoming. I think even a better version because he might honestly have more talent than Baker. I think he has a better arm. He's a great athlete. And this brings up the question, what do the Vikings do this offseason? I think it would be a colossal mistake to let Sam Darnold walk, because if your whole thing is, hey, we drafted JJ in pick 10, we want to give the keys to the franchise to him, we're going to let Sam walk or maybe tag Sam and trade him somewhere for a pick. There's no guarantee that J.J. McCarthy is ever going to look as good as what Sam Darnold has done this season. So if I were running the Vikings, I'd just pay Darnold, and I'd be like, okay, well, we drafted JJ, but things change. Circumstances change. We got new information. We found this guy, Darnold, that really fucking works in our system. They're what right now, 11-2, 12-2? There's no guarantee you're ever going to be that good under JJ McCarthy. Whereas with Darnold, it's literally there. It's proven. We can be this good with this guy. I think it would be fucking crazy to get rid of Sam Darnold, but I also said that about Kirk. And, it turns out the Vikings knew exactly what they were doing with Kirk Cousins. They let him go at the right time. So maybe if they move on to JJ, it'll be even better. I don't know. I would keep Sam. He's been really, really good. And within this offensive system, I think he can continue to be extremely productive. Number 8, I have Matthew Stafford. You guys know my whole spiel on Stafford, really underrated. When he's upright, the Rams have one of the most lethal passing attacks in the NFL. He's a proven winner. So when you're talking about like a playoff run, and if you think back all the way to the beginning of this video when I said I was ranking these guys based on if I want to win the Super Bowl, who would I want the most? Yeah, Stafford's going to rank pretty high because the guy has won a fucking Super Bowl. He has the experience. He has all the talent. Maybe not the most mobile guy, but when you're ranking pure arm talents, Matthew Stafford is right there. Like I said, he has the Super Bowl, and the Rams are just a red-hot team right now. The Rams are not a team you want to match up in the first round. I think the Rams would be a matchup nightmare for whoever they play if they do end up winning that division. And Stafford is the big reason of that. He is the engine of this offense. Number 7, I have Jalen Hurts. I feel like is kind of a polarizing player. I've always been high on Jalen. I loved watching Jalen at Oklahoma. That was back when I didn't even really watch college football, but that connection of Jalen and CD at Oklahoma I thought was really fun to watch. I'd watch it at my dad's because, he likes Oklahoma. We would watch them. So I've liked Jalen Hurts for a really long time, and I feel like I've been a big supporter of his. Even like going into this year, a lot of people were down on Jalen. I still ranked him pretty high because I've seen the upside of Jalen. I've seen the best version of what he can be, and what he was runner-up for MVP, outplayed Mahomes in a Super Bowl. His best game as a pro was in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not like up for debate. That's an objective stat. Go look at how he played in that Super Bowl game. I think he even probably should have won MVP that year in 2022 just based on what he did. He's one of the best dual threat players in the league. Just basically does everything you'd want. Now, I think the problem with the Eagles and the problem with sometimes with Jalen is sometimes they do ask him to do too much, which, I really think there's only like 3 or 4 guys on the planet that you can just say, put on your Superman cape and go carry us. Jalen Hurts isn't one of those guys. So whenever you just throw Jalen out there and you're like, hey, go win us a game, maybe he can do it, but not reliably. So that's when the Eagles really struggled, particularly earlier this year when they had injuries to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. He was really struggling. But when that team's fully healthy, I would bet on Jalen Hurts. The guy's just a winner. He's a proven winner. Everywhere he's gone, he has the dual threat ability. He throws a great deep ball, great athlete, great leader. Basically everything you'd want in a quarterback. Number 6, I have Jared Goff. Jared Goff is the most efficient player in the NFL. If you want a pure production machine, that is what Jared Goff is. He is a football machine. You just want a guy like... What are those things called that throw the football? I think they're called the jugs machine. Let me know if I'm wrong about that, but it's that thing that football players practice with, usually receivers. It's the thing that spits out the ball to you to catch. That's what Jared Goff is. He's a jugs machine. He's like, it's kind of unprecedented, but it's like at the same time, yeah, he was a number 1 overall pick for a reason. He has a fucking beautiful deep ball, an incredible arm, most accurate, efficient player in the NFL, operating that system with the Lions. I think he deserves to be this high, and I think he is actually a legit MVP candidate. I wouldn't give him MVP, but I would put him definitely in the top 5 for MVP this year with how good he's played. And how he just runs this Lions offense. Like, people always talk about, of course, the Lions have the great roster. This Lions offense doesn't work without Jared Goff. He plays his role perfectly. This is the quintessential game manager. It is Tom Brady-esque. Obviously, he's not as good as Tom, obviously. But I'm talking about the style of play. Just the clean, efficient, make the perfect read, very little mistakes. That's what Jared Goff is. Now we're getting into the top 5. You guys can probably guess the 5 guys here because it's usually this top 5 no matter what year it is. Seems like the past couple years this is always the top 5. The order might change a little, but the 5 guys are the same. 5, we have Justin Herbert. Guy is... he's not talked about enough for how good he is. Like, even with... This is the thing that blows me away with Justin Herbert is You take his weapons away this year, and he's like still having one of his best years. Like, he's literally throwing to you and me out there. Like, Quentin Johnston was considered a bust last year, but now, out of necessity, playing with Herbert, he actually looks like a pretty good player. Ladd McConkey, I like, but I never saw him as like a number one option. That's kind of what he's been for the Chargers as a rookie. Justin Herbert is a freak. I mean, again, just the raw production, he's one of the most productive players in the league. When you look at relative to the talent around him, like, he doesn't have anyone. He doesn't have like a reliable number one guy I can go to. He has a rookie and a guy who was considered a bust last year in Quentin Johnston. That's his top two targets right there, and he has taken them, and they're probably going to be a playoff team. Now, the injuries could derail them. I don't know, because they are the 7th seed right now. If the injuries do come back to bite them in the ass, I don't know, but it's not to the fault of Herbert. He is such a generational level talent. Number 4, I have Lamar Jackson. So again, this list is based on if I want to win the Super Bowl. Remember that. That's what I said. So maybe you could argue Lamar should be higher if it's just in a vacuum type list, but this list I specifically made in the context of this is the order I would take them if I want to win the Super Bowl. We're at a point now with Lamar Jackson where when you're talking about the regular season, Lamar Jackson is legitimately, I think, one of the 10 best players we've ever seen. As a regular season player, Lamar Jackson has gotten to that level where we're legitimately into all-time conversations with Lamar. This guy's a 2-time MVP. I think he wins about 75% of his games. That's his win percentage. He's like 26-1 or whatever the fuck. Let me know if you know the exact stat against the NFC. This is an all-time great player. This is legitimately one of the greatest players we've ever seen play the game of football. We're at a point now where it doesn't really matter what he does in the regular season. For Lamar, it's always going to come down to, let's see it in the playoffs. And I hate that because he is such a good player, but that is always going to be the talking point. Until Lamar Jackson really has a great dominant playoff run, that is always going to be the narrative surrounding Lamar because time after time we've seen him dominate the regular season, playoffs come around, and he's simply just not the same player. It's happened every single year. It even happened this past year where I get it, it's the Chiefs, but you were in Baltimore, you were the 1 seed, you were the MVP, you kind of need to be able to win that, and Lamar was terrible in that game against the Chiefs, just flat out bad. And a lot of people blamed Monken, rightfully so. I think Todd Monken is kind of a fucking moron. I don't know why people rush to say Todd Monken's a good coordinator. I don't believe that at all. But Lamar should have gotten his share of the blame as well because Lamar was not good in that game. So for Lamar, it's just always going to be about that. We know how good he is in the regular season. He's an all-time great. For him, it's always going to be the playoffs. That's all it is. Number 3, I have Joe Burrow. Again, trying to win a Super Bowl. I've seen Joe Burrow get to a Super Bowl. I've seen him get within a play of winning a Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, and if the MVP was strictly about stats and like just simple value, like if you take a guy off a team, I think Burrow would be the MVP. If MVP meant we take this guy off his team and they suck, that would be Joe Burrow with the Bengals, with how he's elevated them. I think he leads the league in passing touchdowns this year. He's just such a raw, productive player. He elevates in the big games, likes it when the spotlight is on. You know, he shines brightest in the biggest moments, basically opposite of Lamar. So I would take Joe Burrow. Again, if I'm trying to win the Super Bowl, I'd rather have Joe Burrow than Lamar Jackson. Number 2, Patrick Mahomes. Just based off this season, something quite ain't right with Patrick Mahomes. Now, I feel kind of like an idiot because I say this every year. So I'll just say number 1 because you guys know who it is. It's Josh Allen. So why did this year... For this season, why did I put Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes? Because what we're seeing from Josh Allen right now is literally like, there's a point where it's like generational, but there's, I think, a tier above that where it's like, we've never seen this before. Like what we're seeing with Josh Allen, with how he's performed in these games. You look at that game against the Rams. I know they lost. That was really because of their defense, and that's why I'm not so confident on the Bills as an overall team. But Josh Allen individually threw 3 touchdowns and had 3 rushing touchdowns. I've never seen a more Superman, Herculean type performance from an individual player in my life. I think that was the greatest quarterback game that I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. Then you turn around the game against the Lions, the avalanche of points he put up against the Detroit Lions. Like, Patrick Mahomes isn't doing this. The Chiefs don't really play that style of football. So when you're asking me about just raw talent, right now, Josh Allen's talent has been on display this year, whereas the Chiefs' offense looks very stoic and just slow, and it's just not really what it once was. Now, in a playoff matchup, if the Chiefs were to play the Bills, which team would I take? I would take the Chiefs. But I don't know if that's necessarily to the fault of Allen. I think that's more so the Chiefs have psychologically owned the Bills. They have a far better head coach. I'm still not a big Sean McDermott guy. And when we talk about, compare Josh Allen to Lamar, that's something that a lot of Lamar supporters bring up. When people point to Lamar's playoff track record, they go, oh, well, Josh Allen hasn't won anything either. Well, just go look at how they've performed in the games. The Bills haven't lost these games because of Josh Allen. Josh Allen has actually been very good in the playoffs. I think that's actually a really stupid argument if you're going to make that is, well, Josh Allen hasn't done anything either. Go look at what he's done. It's been his team that's held him back. His coach is incompetent. I'm not a Sean McDermott guy whatsoever. His kicker, Tyler Bass, single-handedly costed them the game last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, at the end of the day, with these top 3 guys, they're all so close because they're all so good. It's really splitting hairs. If you put Mahomes at number 1, I think that's really fair just because he has the cachet, he has the resume to earn that. But I just think Josh Allen has been on such a different level. And as a player, he brings that physicality. He brings that athleticism that Mahomes doesn't quite have. Like, Mahomes, of course, is a good athlete. He can get out of the pocket. But Josh Allen, since Josh Allen has entered the NFL in 2018, he's the second, in terms of rushing touchdowns, he's number 2 on that list. So since 2018, Josh Allen is number 2 in rushing touchdowns. He's a fucking quarterback. And Lamar's whole thing is that he's this great dual threat guy. Josh Allen is number 2 on the list. The only person in front of Josh Allen on rushing touchdowns since 2018 is Derrick Henry, a Hall of Fame running back. That's it. Then it's Josh, and there's a pretty big margin to number 3. So I just think he is, at this point in time, the greatest offensive engine. He's a guy that I would feel most comfortable, at least right now, with just, hey, if you got to throw in your cape to go win a game, that's the guy, because we've seen it displayed this year. That guy is playing on a different level this year. So that has been it for me ranking every starting NFL quarterback. If you made it this far in the video, you listened to me blab this long, really, really appreciate it. These videos always turn out to be so long. Sorry about that, guys. I do like to ramble here. But that's been it for the video. Definitely let me know your list down in the comments. Go ahead and criticize mine all you want. Let me know how big of an idiot I am. If you made it this far in the video, like I said, I really do appreciate it. Go ahead and like and subscribe. Thanks.